Hello everyone, today we're going to talk about how to perform a dihybrid cross. These are going to take a little bit more time and are just a little bit more complicated because now we're dealing with two traits at a time as opposed to just one with a monohybrid cross. The way we go about analyzing the problem and figuring out what we need to do to answer the problem are the same. However, you'll see in a moment how it can get just a little bit trickier. So let's start. Let's read through our problem and highlight things as we go along. So black hair is dominant to blonde hair, but now we have a second trait. Being tall is dominant to being short. So let's assign some symbolism here. So for black hair versus blonde hair, black hair being dominant, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a big B is for black hair. An individual will have black hair as long as they have one big B. The second allele does not matter. Blonde hair is recessive, so the only way to have blonde hair is you have to have two lowercase b's. Tall is dominant to being short, so once again, as long as you have, I'll choose t's here, one big T makes you tall. The only way to be short is if you're homozygous recessive, so two lowercase t's. So we have our possibilities for each individual trait. Let's read through the rest of the problem now. A woman who is heterozygous for black hair and being tall. So we have two traits that she is heterozygous for. I'm going to write her genotype over here. So she is heterozygous for black hair and heterozygous for being tall. She's going to be crossed with a man who is homozygous for black hair and being short. Black hair is the dominant trait. Short is the recessive trait, so his genotype is going to then be big B for having black hair. He's short. The only way to be short is fully recessive. So now I have my two parent genotypes. Now what does the problem ultimately want us to answer? It wants us to answer the following. What is the probability? All right, there's our word again. That means percentage or fraction is what we want to ultimately get to. That they will have a child who has black hair and is also short. So I'm going to make a little notation for myself. I'm looking at the chances that this couple is going to have a child who has black hair, which means they have at least one big B, and they are short, two recessive alleles. That's what we're going to be looking for when we do our Punnett squares. So to do this, we can do this one of two ways. We can use a much larger square over here. That means we could possibly have to fill in 16 squares for a dihybrid, or we could do it a little bit differently and just use two separate monohybrid cross Punnett squares, and that'll get us to the exact same answer eventually. So I'm going to go through both processes with you, and you can choose which one you prefer and use whatever one you like the best to work out all your problems for your homework assignments. So let me clear things up here right now, and we'll work through how to do this. So let's cross these two parents up here. Let me highlight them once again so we can just keep referring back to them. So the woman who is heterozygous for black hair and being tall, and the man who is homozygous for black hair and being short. So what we need to do is I'm going to take this individual here, the female, and I'm just going to write her genotype down here one more time. Following Mendel's law of segregation, for each of these two genes, you can only ever give one allele at a time. So what we have to do is we have to FOIL. We have to look at every possible combination. So let's pretend that to produce an egg cell, this female donates the big B from that first gene. Well, that can very easily pair up with the big T from the second gene or the little t from the second gene. You don't know. That's what the law of independent assortment is. Nothing's guaranteed or linked. So if I look at the first big B in the gene first, I could get either a big B pairing up with a big T to make an egg cell, or a big B pairing up with a little t to make an egg cell. Also, what if the recessive allele for the B gene is donated? That could have paired up with the big T or the little t. So then I have these other two possibilities. in this instance, that could have been produced as an egg cell from this female. So instead of just really 2 options, I now have 1, 2, 3, 4 options for this particular dihybrid cross. Now I'm going to do the same thing with these possible gametes for this parent, and I'm going to show you up here. I'm going to put them above the Punnett square. They could go on the left side too, it doesn't really matter, but I'm just going to choose to put this female's up top. So here's all the possible egg cells she could make. Now for the male, free up some space here and write his genotype down here again. The male is homozygous for black hair and homozygous recessive to be short. Now, hopefully you can already see that this is going to be a lot easier, but remember, you theoretically still have to FOIL. Maybe this big B ends up pairing up with this little t or this little t. Or this big B pairs up with this little t or this little t. So technically, the man can produce 4 possible sperm that would all be big B, with little t. Now, I'm not going to go and write this down 4 times over here on the left. That's just going to be a waste of time because every single row across the Punnett square will end up being the same. So what I like to do is I will write just the possible, get back to black right here, the possible sperm that he can produce here just once, big B, little t. And I just draw a line down indicating that the rest are going to be the same and save myself the effort. Now what I can do is I can go across and I can figure out what the possible children are going to be by doing our multiplication in the boxes. Now make sure that you keep the alleles for the same gene together and you keep the dominant alleles in front. So what I mean by that is, for example, in this first box, I'm going to have an individual who is big B, big T, little t. And if I cross multiply these 2 options, I get big B, little t here. And I just keep going down the line to figure out what my kids could be. Now all these will be the same down the line, which is why I didn't bother going through and writing down big B, little t over here all the way down again. So we have 4 possible children that could be produced. Now, again, what I want to look for is, I want to look for this possibility right here we outlined originally, to get a child who has black hair and who is going to be short. So if I look through my possible offspring, I'm going to highlight those. The first one doesn't meet the description, but the second one does. Look, they're going to have black hair and they're going to be short. The third one doesn't meet that description, but the fourth one does too, black hair and short. So again, I have an individual who is homozygous for black hair and an individual who's going to be heterozygous. The other 2 options do not give us what we want. This one and this one will both have black hair and be tall. So let's answer our question. What is the probability this couple is going to have a child who has black hair and is going to be short? The answer is going to be 2 out of 4. Or if you reduce that, you could have made it 1/2, or you could write 50%. Our answer's done. We're finished. Now, just in case this question would also ask you what the genotypic or phenotypic ratio is, this gets a little bit more complicated. If we focus on the genotypic ratio and you look at the large Punnett square, we actually have 1, 2, 3, 4 different unique genotypic genotypes that could actually have occurred. So our genotypic ratio is going to be, and how we would write it is 1 big B, big T, little t, to 1 individual who is homozygous for black hair and short, to 1 individual who is heterozygous for black hair and heterozygous for being tall, and 1 individual who is heterozygous for black hair and will be short. So it's a 1 to 1 to 1 to 1 ratio. As far as a phenotypic ratio goes, you can see over here where I highlighted, of the 4 possible genotypes, 2 of them in green are black haired and are going to be tall. So I could write 2, I'll just write black for black hair and slash tall, 2, colon, the highlighted yellow ones, 2 individuals who have black hair and be short. So 2 black slash short. And that would be my phenotypic ratio. All right, so our problem is done. Let me go ahead now and show you how to get the same answer but using the smaller monohybrid boxes below. So again, ultimately, we're looking for this answer right here. So what I'm going to do right now is, again, free up a little bit more space. And I am going to now just look at one trait at a time. So let me circle this for you. So let's just look at the B gene for each parent. And I'm going to cross the female who is heterozygous for black hair with the male who is homozygous for black hair. And I can take one of the first individual monohybrid boxes here, and I'm going to write for the female, big B, little b up top, and then big B for the male on the left. And if I fill out this square real fast and go through it, I'm going to see what all the possibilities could be that they could produce, at least for hair color. So there you go. And then what I can do separately is, with the other monohybrid, I can take the second gene, the female is heterozygous for being tall, cross that with the male who is homozygous for being short. Go down to my second Punnett square here, put the female, big T, little t, and the male who is little t, little t. Fill out this Punnett square, big T, little t, big T, little t, little t, little t, little t, little t. And now I just look at the possibilities for each trait individually. So for the first trait, again, what I'm looking for is I'm looking for a child who is going to have black hair. All right, that's the key. So if I look in the first Punnett square box that we did, the monohybrid below, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 of all 4 options are going to produce black hair. So what I can make a little note for myself is pretty much that is a 1-to-1 ratio. All right, or 1/1. 100% chance they're going to have a kid who is going to have black hair. For being tall, if I look at the possible outcomes, what I have here is I have 2 individuals who could be tall, 2, and I'll change the highlighter here a little bit, 2 individuals who could be short. So for the chances of them having a child who's short is 1/2, or 2 out of 4. So now to figure out if I can actually get a child who is going to be big B, doesn't matter what the second allele is for black hair, and short, I just multiply these 2 chances I got over here. So chances of having a child with black hair is 100%, so I can just write it as 1. Multiply that by the chances that I'll have a child who is going to be short, which is 1/2. And 1 times 1/2 is 1/2. The same answer we got here by doing it the longer way. Now, obviously, it took a lot less time to figure it out using the 2 separate monohybrid crosses. So the thing is, if you can figure out, by working through it the way we did here, that if you're really only going to have maybe use 4 boxes in a larger Punnett square, or maybe 8 instead of 16, it's probably going to be a lot easier for you to work it out down here the monohybrid way using 2 separate monohybrid boxes. However, you might come across some instances where 2 parents are heterozygous for both genes, which means you would have 16 possible child outcomes. It might be advantageous for you to fill it out the longer way if you have to answer it in regards to a genotypic ratio at that point. However, I will leave that up to you to decide which works best for you. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you soon.